Ladies and gentlemen, about a week ago, I asked you guys for some NBA hot takes. We got a lot of responses, so I'm coming back with another episode. Let's get right into it. Stephen A. Smith says, slightly biased not being selected to represent the United States in the Olympics is a miscarriage of justice. Absolutely blasphemous. Look, guys, I just need to address this once and for all. I was on pace to qualify for 6 to 7 events in this year's Olympics. I messed up my heel in a pickup basketball game at LA Fitness, and because of that, I just was not able to participate in these events. Guys, please stop tweeting at the Olympics. Please stop tweeting at the United States of America. It's not their fault, guys. I messed up my heel. Kamala Harris says, slightly biased must be the next VP of the United States. Look, I'm very flattered with the offer. I'm so busy. I have so much Quentin Grimes tape to watch. I have so much Najee Marshall tape to watch. While I would love to, and I really appreciate the offer, I don't have the time. Slightly Biased says, slightly biased is the hottest and sexiest NBA content creator. Hey, you guys said it, not me. You guys said it, not me. Last time we did a hot takes video, I spent a good portion of the video talking about the Orlando Magic because I just got a ton of responses involving them. The Magic are going to be really good. The Magic are overrated and everywhere in between. This time we're going to do something a little bit similar, but with the Memphis Grizzlies because, man, I got a lot of responses about them. Same thing. One end of the spectrum versus the other. My man Ahan said, a healthy Grizzlies team makes the Western Conference Finals, and G.G. Jackson is an all-star next year when he gets inserted into the starting lineup. Okay? That's bold. That's a hot take. I like that. My other man, B-Dot, my Mavs Twitter tournament teammate, says the Memphis Grizzlies will not be a top 6 seed and will be a play-in team in 2024-2025. So let's just start there, I guess. In the Western Conference, there's going to be like 8 or 9 teams that you could make an argument will have home court advantage in the postseason, but just naturally, at least 2 or 3 of those teams will be in the play-in tournament. So saying a team like Memphis coming off the year that they had would be in the play-in, I don't think that's that hot of a take. I think it's definitely possible. But I do lean more towards Ahan than I do with B-Dot in the sense that I think the Grizzlies are going to be really, really good. And looking at the roster, I can't think of too many reasons why they shouldn't be good. Obviously, Ja Morant only played in 9 games last season. They were 6-3 in those games. Let's not forget, the last 2 seasons prior to the previous season, they were the 2 seed and the 3 seed. So we've seen it. There's a proof of concept there. We know this Grizzlies team can be very, very good. And you could make the argument that their season from hell last year will end up being a good thing in the long term for them. What do I mean by that? Let's look at like Desmond Bane, for example. With Ja Morant out of the lineup, more responsibility was placed on Desmond Bane, right? He got to work on his self-creation game and develop that, where he probably wouldn't have had that opportunity if Ja Morant were on the roster. Bane had a 28% usage rate last year. That was the highest of his career. 48% of his shots were unassisted. And if you just look at his career prior to that, 59% of his shots unassisted in year 3, 70% in year 2, 82% his rookie year. So a huge self-creation leap there for Desmond Bane. 23 points per game on 58% true shooting before getting hurt in January. Now, he wasn't super efficient in isolation, 0.67 points per possession. That was in the 15th percentile. But just the ability to create shots for himself, to create three-pointers for himself, is something that I think is going to help out tremendously playing alongside Ja Morant. And now, obviously, Ja Morant is going to take the toughest defender on the other team, which means that things will open up a little bit more for Desmond Bane next season. Jaren Jackson Jr., 30% usage last year. That was the highest of his NBA career and the 11th highest in the NBA, which is absolutely insane to think. Jaren Jackson Jr. having a 30% usage rate is just crazy to think about. 59% of his shots last year were assisted. That was the lowest number of his career by a wide margin. And he averaged 3.3 isolation possessions per game. That was the first time in his NBA career that he's averaged over 2. And similar to Desmond Bane, it wasn't necessarily the most efficient thing in the world, but it is encouraging to see those flashes from a guy like Jaren Jackson, who's still developing as a player. I know he's been in the league for quite some time now, but he's still developing. And let's get to the other Jackson, G.G. Jackson, who Ahan said could make the All-Star game in his second year after being inserted into the starting lineup. Let's look at some of the numbers. Over the last 18 games of the season for G.G. Jackson, that was after he joined the starting 5, he averaged 20 points per game and 5 rebounds per game. Now, obviously, this is a small sample size. This is the end of the season, so there's always some weird, wonky stats when teams are just blatantly tanking and teams are resting guys for the playoffs. But if you were just to give G.G. Jackson 20 points per game, 5 rebounds per game over the course of the season, I know we're going out there here. Only 13 rookies since 1990 have averaged 20 points per game and 5 rebounds per game over the course of the season. The only one to not make the All-Star game was Tyreke Evans, who obviously had off-the-court issues that sort of derailed his career. It's definitely a hot take to say that G.G. Jackson will make the All-Star game this year, but the season from hell for Memphis allowed G.G. Jackson to get a huge workload towards the end of the season, which otherwise would not have happened. Like if the Grizzlies are competitive and they're fighting for home court advantage or something, there's next to 0% chance that we see G.G. Jackson have a real significant role on the team last year. And I mean, beyond those guys, Vince Williams Jr. was like one of the bigger bright spots in the entire NBA last season, really blossomed into one of the best perimeter defenders in the league and a guy who can do some stuff offensively. Again, if the Grizzlies are healthy and really competitive, does a guy like that really get an opportunity? I'm not so sure. Scottie Pippen Jr. closed out the season with 19 points per game and 3 steals per game over the backstretch. Does he have much of a role on a healthy Grizzlies team? I'm not so sure, but still, I mean, he showed flashes of being a real legitimate NBA rotational player. Let's not forget that Marcus Smart missed pretty much the entire season and Brandon Clark missed the entire season. Those are important players for them. Now, one of the things that does worry me with them, and there's plenty of numbers to back this up, Steven Adams was so incredibly important for the Grizzlies whenever he was on the team. They were 5 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor in 2022, 7.7 points per 100 possessions better in 2023. Of course, they traded him in a salary dump trade, so he is no longer a part of the equation for the Grizzlies, and they replaced him with Zach Edey, who, one, is a rookie, and you never really know how rookie centers are going to translate, and two, dealt with 2 different injuries in the summer league. And he's a guy who has not been injured throughout his career so far, but he is a massive human being. And while he did look very, very good in the limited minutes he got in summer league, he played 42 minutes across 2 games total. That is just something to keep in mind, something to keep in the back of your brain. He's currently the betting favorite for Rookie of the Year, so even Vegas agrees that he's going to have a huge role on a Grizzlies team that's going to try and be competitive immediately. But if he rolls an ankle or he suffers a knee sprain, knocking on wood, obviously, there's going to be some problems there for the Grizzlies. So that's why I'm hesitant to be like, yeah, they'll be a top 4 seed, no question about it this upcoming season, but I think that they'll be good. And if you factor in injuries into the equation, or if you're scared of injuries, you can say the same thing for every single team. I'm a big believer in the Grizzlies this season. G.G. Jackson, All-Star game. Down the line, I think so. Now, that would be very, very surprising. I think they'll be a team to be reckoned with. Reduce the season. This is a tweet you will find under any NBA hot takes thread. This tweet is from Spud. Reduce the NBA season to 54 games. We need better quality ball, stars playing more frequently. Each game matters more effort into each game because bigger implications. No one wants to watch Detroit versus Charlotte in January. Be done with back-to-backs. Well, I don't think anybody wants to watch Detroit versus Charlotte any month of the year. I do agree that a shortened NBA season would just be a better product, assuming you keep the calendar length the exact same so you can just spread out the schedule a little bit more. 54 might be pushing it. Like, reducing the season by 30 games is never, ever going to fucking happen, ever. And while I agree this will be a better product, this will never happen in a million years, and let me explain why. The NBA set all-time attendance and sellout records this past season. The NBA set a team sponsorship record at $1.5 billion last season. Each team generates between $1 to $2 million per home game, and that's not including the playoffs. And at the end of the day, this is a business. And while it would be better for the consumer and it would probably be better for the long-term health of the players themselves, there is no way they are passing up on opportunities to make money. Look at the NFL. One of the pillars of the NFL, and one of the reasons why it's as popular as it is that it's a short schedule. So all these games mean something. There's 1 game a week. There's only 16, 17 weeks. So each game matters. They increased the schedule to 17 games in 2021, and it sounds like they're about to increase the schedule again to 18 games. Why is that? Because they make so much fucking money. They make an absurd amount of money. And the product is suffering. The product will suffer in the NFL the longer they extend the schedule because players are going to get hurt and it's going to be trash to watch. It already is. Last year was one of the worst NFL seasons I can remember by a product standpoint because of how many fucking guys were hurt. Same thing with college football. Right? It used to be each game matters because if you lose once or twice, you're out of the national championship conversation. Well, now they've expanded it to a 12-team playoff, so you got room for a few losses here and there. Expanding the NBA to 32 teams could give them a pathway to shorten the schedule and still make enough money because you have 2 new teams added into the equation. But if they were looking for an excuse to cut the schedule short, they would have done it already. Like the COVID season and the shortened season that followed would have been reason enough to be like, hey, this is what we're going to do from now on. We're going to start the season on Christmas, and we're going to cut it to 72 games, 62 games, whatever the case may be. So I agree, it would be nice. It ain't happening. Cher says, I'll say it because I'm seeing some doomer shit in here already. People overthink NBA defense on this app in these podcasts for the sake of seeming smarter than they are about basketball. The Mavs in 2022 had above average wing defenders and Dwight Powell at center, top 10 defense. Don't you dare disrespect the Canadian superhero Dwight Powell ever again. Now, I will say I do partially agree with what you were saying here, although I must add that the Mavs defensively did drop to 14th in the league after they traded away Kristaps Porzingis. How much did KP have a real impact on the Mavs defense? Probably a good amount because of his shot blocking ability and stuff like that, although he was never on the fucking court for the Mavs. Just didn't want to play for the Mavs, really. And Dorian Finney-Smith is better than average defensively, especially a couple years ago. Reggie Bullock was like really good defensively that year. In fact, he was so good, and the Mavs asked so much out of him that it pretty much ended his career. Like, he had nothing left in the tank after it. But I do agree. This doomer shit with NBA defenses, it's absurd to think about. Defense in a lot of ways is probably better than it's ever been. Just the skill required to be a good defender, considering how good the offenses have become, how smart these teams are, how spaced the floor is, how skilled each individual player is at creating space and separation. The defense just naturally has to follow suit and develop and evolve, and that's what it has done. Like, NBA defenses are incredibly good. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I will say I do agree that certain things have become a little bit overrated, like this idea of a great elite point of attack defenders. It is important because you need guys who can just slow down ball handlers. That way your defense isn't rotating the moment an offensive action starts. But if you just look at the top 5 defenses from last season, you'll notice a trend. That trend is big, versatile, rangy defenders. It's not necessarily elite point of attack defenders. It's rangy, versatile defenders. The Timberwolves, need I say more? The Celtics, need I say more? The Magic, need I say more? That's their entire MO. The Thunder, they might be the exception here. They are a lengthy team. They have some length at the wing and guard positions, but I will say their lack of size really kind of exposed them in the playoffs. And their top 4 defense from a season ago was maybe a little bit fraudulent when it came to playoff basketball, and they played a team like the Mavericks who had size and the ball handlers to handle the ball pressure that they applied. And the Heat, who are always kind of a bigger team. They have Bam Adebayo and Eric Spoelstra. I've always hated this idea that NBA defenses suck all of a sudden, that it's an offensive-only league. That's bullshit. You're not watching. NBA defenses are good, okay? The Elam ending. D. Quinn says, using the Elam ending would be the worst decision the NBA can make. Almost every game moment in NBA history was based on time left in the game and the do or die suspense. This would take them all away. And then Melvrick says, overtimes and possibly fourth quarters too should be target score Elam ending. And here's a little bit of a explanation on the screen as to what the Elam ending involves. I will agree with the first point. Nobody wants to see 10 commercial breaks and 14 free throws in the final minute of the game. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. I go back and forth all the time on what I feel about the Elam ending. I will say, to D. Quinn's point, that all of the great moments in NBA history are because of the time and the clock winding down. That is true, but that's just because that's how the NBA's been. If you added a target score to the equation, you would get great moments because of that as well. The basketball tournament, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, it's a pretty interesting concept, and I've watched some games. It's pretty fun. They use a target score method at the end of the games, and it can lead to some pretty insane comebacks and some insane viewing experiences. But it kind of just goes back to shortening the schedule. Extreme changes like this just probably will not happen. Overtime, it's definitely possible that they go to this at some point. Fourth quarter, they will never do this. I would be shocked if they ever make a change this extreme. I mean, 48 minutes, 12-minute quarters, this has been basketball forever. Like, this has literally been the NBA for damn near a century at this point. There's just no way they'll make a change this drastic. Although I do think it'd be interesting. Z-Crom says, you can only win a championship in the NBA if you have a top 5 caliber player on the roster. If you don't have that, then you should have 0 championship aspirations. This is not a hot take at all. This is widely accepted as fact. Genuinely, probably the only example of this ever not being true was the 2004 Pistons. Like, that's genuinely probably the only example. Even if you want to say Jason Tatum's not a top 5 player in the NBA, he's right around it, and he was first team All-NBA a season ago. So he was voted as a top 5 player in the NBA. This is why it was so funny when Becky Hammon got like a ton of shit for saying Jalen Brunson probably can't be the number 1 guy on an NBA championship contending team. Yeah, I mean, Brunson was close to being a top 5 player a season ago. He finished top 5 in MVP voting. But just historically speaking, is Brunson the level of player that is required to win an NBA championship? Probably not. And I love the guy to death, but probably not. And that shouldn't be that controversial of a statement. SOOS says, make the in-season tournament fully single elimination like March Madness, or its excitement will be fully dead soon. This is an interesting idea. That's what makes March Madness and even the Olympics so exciting, is you slip up once. You slip up one singular time, and you could be completely and totally fucked. I do think that would be kind of fun and interesting. And I think that you would have some instances of teams like, oh, holy shit, how are the Charlotte Hornets in the semifinals of the in-season tournament? I don't know. This would be fun to experiment with. They're in the experimenting stage of this. People already think it's gimmicky. People already think it's lame. I wouldn't mind seeing this, honestly. And then you could just do clever scheduling where, okay, the teams who have been eliminated will just play each other again to make the schedules work. Prime said, if Trae Young had a full head of hair, he would be an all-star every year. I'm so serious. I'm so serious, too. I'm being dead serious. I made a video last offseason wondering, why is Trae Young so underrated? Why is he so overlooked? And I'm not joking. The conclusion that I came to was that it was his balding hair, and that people just think that he's an ugly guy. Not that I'm saying I think it. That's just what people say that they think. And I actually genuinely believe that is about 60 to 70% of the reason why I reference something called the halo effect, in which we view attractive people as better at what they do than they actually are, and we view unattractive, or people who we deem unattractive, as worse at their occupation than they actually are. I actually believe this applies to Trae Young. You guys know I believe this to be true. I will continue to die on the Trae Young hill.